The paper made a dry little sound when I unfolded it on the kitchen table. I remember that better than I remember the date. The house was quiet, the lamp was low, and my wife was standing across from me with both hands resting against the back of a chair. I had spent nearly 2 weeks telling myself she was wrong about my father, worse than wrong. I had told her she was stepping outside her place by questioning him. Then I looked down at 3 figures written in my father's own hand, and I understood that the person who had refused to see clearly was me. My name is Jonas. I am a husband, a father, and a man responsible for a household in an old order Amish community. I share these stories because family life looks simple from a distance, but the hardest decisions are often made around a plain table where nobody outside the house can see them. If you have ever had to choose between loyalty to the family you came from and trust in the family you are building, I would be interested to hear what you learned from it. My father was the kind of man whose word ended a discussion when I was a boy. He was not loud. He did not need to be. He had broad hands, a straight back, and a habit of pausing before he answered a question. When he finally spoke, people listened. I learned to listen earlier than most. He taught me how to sharpen a plane blade on a wet stone before I was tall enough to see over the workbench. He taught me how to set a fence post so frost would not push it crooked. He taught me that debt should make a man uncomfortable, and that an agreement made with a handshake should carry as much weight as one written on paper. Those lessons stayed with me. So did the habit of believing him. By the time I married, I was working a small farm and doing cabinet work in a shop behind the barn. It was not a large operation. Most weeks there were 2 or 3 orders moving through the shop at once. A kitchen table, a set of cupboards, maybe a cedar chest for a wedding. My wife kept the household accounts in a narrow black ledger. She wrote small and neat. Every sack of flour, every spool of thread, every payment for seed or lamp oil had a place. I trusted her with that work because she was better at it than I was. That matters to say now, because at the time I managed to forget it. The trouble began with a piece of land that touched ours along the west fence. It was not much to look at. 11 acres, mostly pasture, with a low wet corner that stayed soft until early summer. But it mattered because our oldest boys were growing, and I was thinking ahead. More pasture meant another milk cow. More ground meant room for a larger garden. It also meant that one day, if one of our children wanted to build nearby, there might be a place for that. The owner was getting older and wanted to sell. My father came to me with a plan. He had savings. I had some cash set aside from cabinet work. If we put the money together, we could buy the land without taking a large loan. The deed would go in my name because the parcel joined my farm, and I would repay my father's share over several years after harvest and after larger shop orders were paid. There was nothing unusual about family helping family. That part made sense to me. My wife was cautious from the beginning. She did not oppose buying the land. She asked questions about the amount my father expected back, how often I would pay him, and whether there would be a written record. I remember feeling irritated by that last question. To me, asking for a written record from my own father sounded like saying his word was not enough. I told her we did not need to turn family into a business transaction. She did not argue then. The purchase went through in late autumn. The ground was hard enough by then that wagon wheels rattled over the ruts. We walked the new fence line with the children on a Sunday afternoon, and I felt proud in a quiet way. I remember looking toward the bare maple trees and imagining how the place might look in 10 years. The first payment to my father was due after a large cabinet order was finished in January. I counted the money at the kitchen table, $800. My wife entered it in the ledger. I carried it to my father in an envelope. The next payment came in April, $600, then another in July, $900. My wife wrote each amount down. She also marked the date, and beside it, a small letter P for paid. I did not ask my father for receipts. That was the first mistake. The second mistake was believing that because I had never caught a man lying to me, he was therefore incapable of doing it. Almost a year after we bought the property, my father mentioned that I was falling behind. At first, I thought I had misunderstood him. I had paid more than $2,000 that year. The agreement, as I remembered it, allowed me to pay according to what the farm and shop could manage. There had been no fixed monthly amount. My father said his understanding had been different. He believed I had promised a larger yearly payment. I went home unsettled, but not suspicious. My wife opened the black ledger and showed me every payment. She asked how much my father believed was still owed. When I told her, she sat still for a moment and did the arithmetic twice. His number was higher than ours by $1,200. I said there had to be a simple explanation. She asked me to bring the ledger the next time I spoke with him. I refused. That refusal embarrasses me now. I told myself I was protecting my father's dignity. In truth, I was protecting my own idea of him. There is a difference. A few days later, my wife told me something else. She had noticed that one of the payments in our ledger fell on the same week my father had bought a new piece of equipment for his own shop. She was not accusing him of anything because of that. She was trying to remember the timing. She also said that months earlier, when she had delivered a basket to my parents' house, she had seen a folded paper on my father's desk with my name and several amounts written beneath it. I felt heat rise in my face. I asked why she had been looking at papers on his desk. She said she had not been looking through anything. The paper had been open. I did not hear the distinction. What I heard was a wife questioning my father. That night, I used a word I wish I had not used. I called her disobedient. In our home, I believed that a husband should carry responsibility and that a wife should respect that responsibility. I still believe marriage requires order, sacrifice, and respect from both people. But I had turned responsibility into a shield against correction. Instead of asking whether she was right, I asked whether she had the right to make me uncomfortable. She did not raise her voice. She said only one sentence to me. I am not asking you to choose me over him. I am asking you to look. Then she closed the ledger and went upstairs. That sentence followed me for days. The next morning I worked badly. I cut one board 1/8 of an inch short because I measured from the wrong mark. I had to set it aside and start again. The shop smelled of oak dust and linseed oil, and every time the hand plane ran across the grain, I heard that sentence in my head. I am asking you to look. I did not want to look. That is important. People sometimes imagine that truth is hard because it is hidden. Often truth is hard because some part of you already knows where to find it. I waited another week before speaking to my father again. I brought the question up while we were stacking rough-cut boards in his shed. I asked him to walk me through the balance. He gave me a number. I asked how he reached it. He said he had kept his own record. I asked to see it. He did not refuse, but he did not show it to me either. He said he would find it later. That was the first moment I felt something change inside me. My father was a careful man. He knew where every drill bit belonged. He could remember the cost of a horse bought 15 years earlier. A record involving several $1,000s was not something he would misplace casually. I went home and told my wife I wanted to compare everything. She did not look pleased. She did not look victorious. She simply brought the ledger to the table. We added every payment from the beginning, $3,100. Then we listed the amount my father had originally contributed toward the land. We subtracted the payments. We checked it again. The difference between our balance and the balance he claimed was exactly $1,200. Not close to $1,200, exactly $1,200. That number bothered me because it was too clean to feel like a mistake. 2 evenings later, my younger brother stopped by the shop to return an auger bit. He mentioned, without knowing any of this, that our father had recently complained about several family loans that were not being repaid quickly enough. I did not question my brother. I did not want to pull another person into something that still might have an innocent explanation. But the next day, I went to my father's house. He was away, helping a neighbor repair a shed roof. My mother told me I could wait in the front room. I sat for 10 minutes, then 20. On a small writing desk near the window was a stack of account papers, held together with string. I had no intention of searching his things. Then I saw my own name. The top sheet was not hidden. My name was written near the center in dark pencil. I stood there for a long time before touching it. Even now, I can remember the weight of that moment better than the paper itself. I was not afraid of finding nothing. I was afraid of finding something. I untied the string and looked only at the page with my name. There were the payments. $800 in January, $600 in April, $900 in July. But beside the first and third payments, my father had written smaller figures in the margin. $400 beside the first, $800 beside the third. Together they made $1,200. At the bottom of the page, he had added those amounts back into the balance I owed. I stared at the figures until they blurred. There was no complicated fraud. No hidden deed, no forged signature, just arithmetic written in pencil by a man I had trusted my whole life. When my father came home, I was still sitting beside the desk. I did not shout. I asked him what the margin numbers meant. He looked at the page, then he looked at me. For the first time in my life, my father looked older than I remembered him. What came next took hours, and I will not pretend every part of it was clear. He had been under more pressure than I knew. His shop had lost 2 large orders. A horse had gone lame. There were medical bills in the extended family he had helped cover. He had begun moving money between obligations, telling himself he would straighten it out after the next good season. The $1,200 from my payments had been used elsewhere. Instead of admitting that, he had written the money back into what I supposedly owed him. He had not planned, according to him, to cheat me forever. He had planned to correct it later. That explanation did not make the numbers disappear. For several minutes, I could not decide which hurt more, that my father had done it or that my wife had warned me, and I had treated her warning like rebellion. I walked home in the dark. The distance between our houses was not far, perhaps 20 minutes at an ordinary pace. That night it felt longer. Frost had formed along the grass near the ditch, and my boots made a faint crunch at the road edge. I kept thinking about all the times I had taught my own children that telling the truth late is not the same as telling it when it matters. Then I thought about the word I had used at my own kitchen table, disobedient. It felt ugly in my mouth even when I did not say it aloud. My wife was awake when I came in. The lamp was still burning. I put the account page on the table. She read it. I told her she had been right. Then I told her something harder. I had been wrong before I ever saw the paper. I had been wrong when I decided that respect meant she should silence her judgment so mine could remain comfortable. I had been wrong when I made loyalty to my father more important than fairness to my wife, and I had been wrong when I used my place as husband to avoid the duty that comes with that place. A man can demand quiet and call it peace. They are not the same thing. The next weeks were difficult. My father and I did not stop speaking, but our relationship changed. We wrote out the land agreement from beginning to end. Every payment already made was acknowledged. The missing $1,200 was credited properly. Future payments were signed by both of us. That felt strange at first. There had been a time when I would have seen a written receipt as evidence of distrust. I began to see it differently. Clear records do not have to insult trust. Sometimes they protect it from memory, pressure, pride, and temptation. My father eventually repaid the money he had diverted. It did not happen at once. It took most of a year. The harder repair was not financial. For months, I noticed that my wife became careful before disagreeing with me. She would pause longer. She would soften questions that did not need softening. I had taught her with one angry word that honesty with me could be punished as disrespect. That was mine to repair. So I started doing something simple. When she questioned a decision, I made myself ask what she was seeing that I was not. Not every concern turned out to be correct. Mine did not either. That was never the point. The point was that marriage is not strengthened when one person is never allowed to challenge the other. A household needs someone willing to say the fence post is leaning before it falls. It needs someone willing to notice that the figures do not match. It needs enough trust that correction is not treated as betrayal. I had confused authority with immunity. A husband is not made stronger because nobody questions him. He is made safer when the person closest to him can speak before a bad decision becomes an expensive one. I also had to reconsider what it meant to honor my father. For most of my life, honor had meant listening, helping, defending, and giving him the benefit of the doubt. Those things still mattered. But if I helped him hide a wrong simply because he was my father, I would not be honoring him. I would be helping the wrong grow. There is a kind of loyalty that protects a person from consequences. There is another kind that refuses to leave him alone with his worst decision. I had to learn the difference. My father and I never returned completely to the way we were before. I do not say that bitterly. Some things, once known, cannot be unknown. But over time, we found a more honest relationship. I stopped treating him as a man who could not fail. He stopped expecting me to accept every answer without question. In some ways, losing that image of him allowed me to know him more truthfully. He was still the man who taught me to sharpen a blade and brace a fence. He was also a man who had been frightened by money trouble and had made a dishonest choice because he thought he could repair it before anyone noticed. Both things were true. That is harder than having a hero or a villain. Real family usually is. The west pasture is still part of our farm. In spring it turns green before the higher ground does because the soil holds water. We have used it for grazing, and one of my sons helped replace the old fence along the north edge a few years ago. Sometimes I walk that fence and think about what the land cost. I do not mean the purchase price. It cost me a simple idea of my father. It cost my wife some trust in my judgment. It cost me the comfort of believing that good intentions make careful records unnecessary. But it also gave me something I did not have before. I learned that being the head of a household does not mean being the only pair of eyes in it. I learned that a warning can sound disrespectful when pride is doing the listening. And I learned that when the person who has built a life beside you asks you to look, you should probably look before you start defending what you have not examined. That is the clearest thing I understand now. I cannot change the word I used against my wife that night. I cannot make the account page disappear. I cannot make my father into the man I once imagined him to be. What I can do is carry the lesson forward. Trust should be strong enough to survive questions. Respect should be strong enough to survive correction. And responsibility means you do not get to hide behind your role when your judgment fails. If you value these quieter stories about marriage, family, faith, work, and the decisions that shape a household, you are welcome to subscribe. And I would like to ask you something specific. If someone you loved warned you about a person you had trusted your whole life, what would it take for you to truly listen?